You pride yourself on being honest. You tell yourself that you face reality, that you are not one of those people who live in delusion. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The person you lie to most is not your boss, your partner, or even your friends. It's you. Think about it carefully. How many times have you insisted you were fine when you were breaking inside? How many times have you told yourself, this relationship is still alive, when deep down you knew it was already dead? How many times have you looked in the mirror and said, I'm happy with my choices, while a quiet voice inside whispered that you had betrayed your own potential? These are not rare lapses. They are the architecture of daily life. Self-deception is not the exception, it's the rule. Friedrich Nietzsche knew this better than anyone. He warned that human beings do not truly want the truth. What we want are illusions, illusions strong enough to make existence bearable. Strip away those illusions too quickly and you risk collapse. Expose too much raw truth at once, and the human spirit can shatter under its weight. So, paradoxically, lying to ourselves isn't always weakness, it's survival. Ask yourself, why do we so quickly edit our memories, soften the edges of our failures, or inflate our importance? Why do we cling to optimism in the face of overwhelming evidence? It's because, without these inner lies, existence would sometimes feel too heavy to carry. We invent small lies to get out of bed, to endure heartbreak, to face work we despise. They are like painkillers for the soul. They dull the unbearable sting of reality. But here lies the danger. The very lies that protect you also trap you. They shield you from immediate pain, but they slowly erode your freedom. They preserve your comfort, but they rob you of growth. Each time you whisper a little story to yourself, I'll change later, I deserve this distraction, everything will work itself out, you create a cocoon. And in that cocoon, nothing transforms. Nietzsche's brutal insight is this: we live suspended between two impossible desires. The desire for truth, because without truth, we become hollow. And the desire for illusion, because without illusion, the truth destroys us. You are caught between these poles every single day. And here is the question that should unsettle you. If you are lying to yourself right now, and you almost certainly are, what is the cost? What dream have you abandoned because you convinced yourself it was unrealistic? What relationship have you tolerated because you told yourself it was good enough? What hidden strength have you smothered under the blanket of a comforting story? The worst part about self-deception is not that it fools others, it's that it fools you into wasting your own life. Nietzsche did not come to rescue you with sweet reassurances. He came to rip away the illusions you cling to and force you to stand naked before the raw truth of your own existence. His question is not, do you lie to yourself? He already knows the answer. His question is, can you survive the truth without the lies you've built around it? That is the journey we are about to take. Not into easy platitudes, not into the safety of motivational slogans, but into the uncomfortable territory where your illusions burn and something stronger, something more real, has the chance to emerge. In 1873, a young Friedrich Nietzsche sat in his study and wrote something that would shatter comfortable assumptions about truth forever. In his essay On Truth and Lies in a Non-Moral Sense, he posed a question so unsettling that most people still can't bear to answer it honestly. What if the truths we cling to are just lies we've forgotten are lies? Nietzsche wasn't interested in giving you easy answers. He was interested in destroying your certainty. And he began with this radical claim. Human beings have created an elaborate fiction called truth, and then convinced themselves it's real. We point to facts, to science, to logic, and say, this is reality. But Nietzsche saw something else entirely. A species so desperate to make sense of chaos that it would invent meaning and then worship its own invention. Think about the stories you tell yourself about who you are. I'm a good person. I'm making progress. My life has purpose. These aren't discoveries you made about reality. They're constructions you built to survive reality. Strip them away, and what remains? Nietzsche's answer was terrifying. Nothing but the raw, meaningless flux of existence. But here's where Nietzsche becomes dangerous to your comfortable worldview. He didn't stop at showing that your truths might be illusions. He went further. He argued that these illusions aren't accidents, they're necessities. Without them, you would collapse under the weight of what he called the terrible truth. What is this terrible truth? That there is no inherent meaning to your suffering, no cosmic purpose to your struggles, no guarantee that your efforts matter, no divine plan ensuring everything works out. Just you, thrown into existence without your consent, forced to create meaning in a universe that offers none. This is why you lie to yourself. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And humans cannot survive pure, unfiltered reality. Nietzsche called this tension the will to truth, our desperate drive to know reality as it actually is. But he saw the paradox immediately. The more truth we discover, the more we realize we cannot bear it. So we develop what he might call noble lies. Stories beautiful enough and strong enough to make existence tolerable. You see this everywhere once you start looking. The parent who tells themselves their child is special, not just because they love them, but because without that illusion, raising a child becomes an exercise in cosmic absurdity. The artist who believes their work matters, not because the universe cares about human creativity, but because without that belief, why create anything at all? The lover who insists this time will be different, not because evidence supports it, but because without hope, love becomes impossible. Nietzsche wasn't condemning these lies. He was revealing their necessity. "What does not destroy me makes me stronger," he famously wrote. But he might have added, "And what does not lie to me destroys me." This creates what Nietzsche saw as the fundamental human predicament. We are truth-seeking creatures who cannot survive the truths we seek. We are meaning-making beings who live in a meaningless universe. We demand honesty while depending on deception. And this is where Nietzsche becomes truly radical. Most philosophers before him tried to resolve this paradox, to find a way to live with pure truth or to justify our illusions. Nietzsche refused both easy answers. Instead, he asked, what if this tension is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be embraced? What if the goal isn't to eliminate self-deception, but to become conscious of it? What if the question isn't, how can I live without lies, but which lies are worth living for? This is why Nietzsche remains dangerous more than a century after his death. He doesn't offer you the comfort of absolute truth or the safety of righteous illusion. He offers you something far more terrifying and far more valuable. The awareness that you are always choosing between competing fictions, and that your freedom lies not in escaping this choice, but in making it consciously. The question he leaves you with is simple and devastating. Now that you know you're lying to yourself, what are you going to do about it? Because here's what Nietzsche understood that most people still refuse to face. Unconscious lies enslave you, but conscious ones might just set you free. Nietzsche intuited what science would later prove. The human mind is not a truth-seeking machine. It's a survival machine. And sometimes survival requires spectacular acts of self-deception. In 1957, a psychologist named Leon Festinger gave this phenomenon a name: cognitive dissonance. He discovered that when reality contradicts what we believe about ourselves, our minds don't simply accept the contradiction. Instead, they launch an elaborate rescue operation to preserve our self-image, even if it means distorting reality itself. Festinger's experiments were elegantly brutal. He paid people either $1 or $20 to lie about enjoying a boring task. Logic says the $20 group should feel worse about lying. They were better compensated for their dishonesty. But the opposite happened. The $1 group convinced themselves they actually had enjoyed the task. Why? Because they couldn't bear the dissonance of seeing themselves as people who would lie for such a small amount. So they rewrote their own experience rather than face an uncomfortable truth about their character. This is your mind on self-deception. Right now, as you listen to this, your brain is performing similar mental gymnastics to protect beliefs you're not even aware you hold. Consider confirmation bias. Your mind's tendency to seek information that confirms what you already believe, while ignoring evidence that challenges it. You don't just accidentally stumble into this bias, you actively collaborate with it. When your political candidate lies, you find ways to rationalize it. When your investment loses money, you find reasons why it will recover. When your relationship shows clear signs of decay, you focus on the few moments that still spark with life. You are not a passive victim of these mental tricks. You are their willing accomplice. But here's where it gets darker. These psychological defense mechanisms don't just protect you from external threats, they protect you from internal ones. Take projection, the unconscious habit of attributing your own uncomfortable traits to others. The person who constantly accuses others of being selfish is often drowning in their own unexpressed selfishness. The one who sees manipulation everywhere may be the most manipulative person in the room. You point fingers outward to avoid the uncomfortable work of looking inward, or consider rationalization, the elegant art of inventing logical reasons for decisions you made emotionally. You didn't buy that expensive gadget because you were feeling insecure and wanted a hit of dopamine. You bought it because it was an investment in productivity. You didn't stay in that toxic job because you were afraid of change. You stayed because you were being responsible. You didn't avoid that difficult conversation because you were cowardly. You avoided it because the timing wasn't right. Each rationalization feels completely genuine in the moment you create it. That's the terrifying beauty of self-deception. It doesn't feel like deception at all. This brings us to what might be the most sophisticated lie we tell ourselves, the story of our own consistency. You believe you are the same person who made decisions yesterday, last year, a decade ago, but you're not. You are constantly changing, evolving, becoming someone new. Yet admitting this fluidity would be terrifying. It would mean acknowledging that the you making decisions today might be making them for a you who will no longer exist tomorrow. So instead, you create what psychologists call a coherent narrative identity. You smooth over the contradictions, edit out the embarrassing chapters, and present yourself, even to yourself, as a coherent character with consistent motivations and values. You are the author, editor, and star of your own biographical fiction. Watch this process in action. Remember the last time you made a decision you regretted. Notice how your memory of that moment has already begun to shift. Maybe you remember being more conflicted than you actually were, giving yourself credit for hesitation you didn't feel. Or maybe you remember being more certain, erasing the doubt that actually plagued you. Your memory isn't a recording device, it's a storytelling device, constantly revising the past to serve the needs of your present self-image. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote about herd morality, the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about being good, moral, rational people. We don't steal because we're honest, not because we're afraid of consequences. We help others because we're compassionate, not because we crave social approval. We work hard because we're disciplined, not because we're terrified of insignificance. These stories aren't entirely false. You probably are honest, compassionate, and disciplined, but they're not the whole truth either. And the part you're hiding from yourself is often the most important part. Consider your relationship with your own mortality. You know you're going to die. Intellectually, this fact is inescapable, but you live as if you have infinite time. You postpone important conversations, delay meaningful experiences, avoid difficult changes because there will be time later. This isn't ignorance. It's a masterful act of self-deception. You've convinced yourself that death happens to other people at some vague future time that has nothing to do with the immediate choices you're making today. Or examine your relationship with your own potential. Deep down, you suspect you're capable of more than you're currently achieving. But admitting this fully would require acknowledging that your current life is, in part, a choice to remain smaller than you could be. So instead, you tell yourself stories about circumstances, bad luck, or other people holding you back. It's easier to be a victim of external forces than to face the possibility that you are, in some fundamental way, a victim of your own comfort with limitation. The most insidious lie of all might be this, that you don't lie to yourself, that you're different, that you're one of the rare ones who sees clearly. Even now, part of your mind is crafting reasons why these mechanisms don't apply to you, why you're the exception, why your self-perceptions are accurate while everyone else's are distorted. That voice, that's not your wisdom speaking. That's your self-deception, protecting itself from exposure by convincing you it doesn't exist. Nietzsche saw all of this more than a century before modern psychology proved him right. He understood that these lies aren't bugs in human consciousness, they're features. They don't make you weak, they make you functional. But they also make you trapped. The question is, what happens when you become conscious of the trap? What Nietzsche intuited through philosophical insight, modern science has proven through ruthless experimentation. The evidence is overwhelming. Self-deception isn't an occasional lapse in judgment. It's hardwired into human psychology at the deepest level. Let's start with Leon Festinger's groundbreaking work on cognitive dissonance in the 1950s. His most famous study didn't just prove that we lie to ourselves, it revealed exactly how we do it. Festinger infiltrated a doomsday cult whose leader predicted the world would end on a specific date. When that date passed and the world stubbornly continued to exist, what did the cult members do? Abandon their beliefs? Admit they'd been deceived? No, they doubled down. They claimed their faith had saved the world. They became more convinced of their leader's divine connection, not less. Faced with irrefutable evidence that their core beliefs were wrong, they performed spectacular mental gymnastics to preserve those beliefs rather than face the truth. You do this too. Every time reality contradicts something you desperately want to believe, your mind launches the same rescue operation. The investment that keeps losing money becomes a long-term play. The relationship that's clearly failing becomes going through a rough patch. The career that's stagnating becomes paying dues. Your mind would rather rewrite reality than admit you made a mistake. But the evidence goes deeper. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky spent decades mapping the systematic ways human judgment deviates from rationality. Their work revealed something unsettling. These aren't random errors. They're predictable biases that consistently push us toward comforting illusions rather than uncomfortable truths. Take the optimism bias, the tendency to overestimate positive outcomes and underestimate negative ones. When researchers ask people about their chances of divorce, they consistently rate their own marriages as more likely to succeed than statistics suggest. When asked about health risks, people acknowledge that smoking causes cancer in general, but somehow believe they are personally less vulnerable. When entrepreneurs start businesses, over 90% believe they'll succeed, despite knowing that most businesses fail. This isn't ignorance, it's motivated reasoning. People know the general statistics. They just carve out magical exceptions for themselves. Or consider the confirmation bias studies that show how actively we collaborate in our own deception. When researchers give people information that contradicts their political beliefs, brain scans reveal something remarkable. The analytical parts of their brains essentially shut down, while the emotional regulation centers light up like Christmas trees. Their brains aren't trying to evaluate the information, they're trying to make the discomfort go away. Even more disturbing is what happens next. After rejecting information that challenges their beliefs, people don't just return to their original position. They become more convinced they were right all along. It's as if the act of defending their beliefs strengthens them, regardless of the quality of that defense. But perhaps the most revelatory research comes from Robert Trivers and his work on the evolutionary psychology of self-deception. In 2011, he published findings that should disturb anyone who values truth. Self-deception evolved because it makes us better liars to others. The person who genuinely believes their own bullshit is more convincing than the conscious deceiver. Evolution favored the capacity for self-deception because self-deceived individuals were more successful at deceiving others. Think about the implications. Your ability to lie to yourself isn't a bug. It's an evolved feature that helped your ancestors survive and reproduce. You come from a long line of successful self-deceivers. It's in your DNA. Trivers' research reveals that self-deception serves multiple functions. It reduces the cognitive load of maintaining lies. It prevents the behavioral tells that conscious liars exhibit. It allows people to take greater risks by underestimating dangers. It enables overconfidence that can intimidate competitors. In evolutionary terms, a little self-deception was a massive advantage. Modern neuroscience adds another layer to this disturbing picture. Studies using brain imaging show that when people engage in self-justification, the same neural pathways activate as when they experience physical pleasure. Literally, your brain rewards you for maintaining comfortable illusions. The same dopamine systems that make you crave food, sex, and drugs also make you crave beliefs that support your self-image. Meanwhile, confronting uncomfortable truths about yourself activates the same brain regions associated with physical pain. Your brain literally experiences self-awareness as a form of injury. No wonder you avoid it. Research on memory provides even more unsettling evidence. Elizabeth Loftus's work on false memories demonstrated that you don't just forget inconvenient facts, you unconsciously revise them. Every time you remember something, you slightly alter that memory to better fit your current self-concept. Over time, your memories become less like historical records and more like propaganda films starring yourself as the hero. Studies on mortality salience, how awareness of death affects behavior, reveal another layer of systematic self-deception. When researchers subtly remind people of their mortality, they don't become more realistic about life's limitations. Instead, they cling more desperately to their cultural worldviews, become more defensive about their beliefs, and engage in more symbolic behaviors designed to create a sense of immortality. The closer you get to acknowledging death's reality, the harder you work to deny it. Perhaps most damning of all is research on the better-than-average effect. When surveyed, 94% of university professors believe they're better teachers than their colleagues. 88% of drivers consider themselves safer than average. 70% of high school students rate themselves as having above-average leadership skills, while only 2% consider themselves below average. Mathematically, this is impossible, but psychologically, it's inevitable. You are probably doing this right now. You're listening to this evidence about human self-deception and thinking, yes, other people certainly do this, but I'm more self-aware than most. That thought itself might be the most sophisticated lie of all. The research paints a clear picture. You are not the rational, self-aware, truth-seeking individual you believe yourself to be. You are a biological organism equipped with powerful psychological mechanisms designed to maintain comforting illusions, even at the cost of accuracy. These mechanisms operate below conscious awareness, which means you can't simply think your way out of them. But here's what the research also reveals. Awareness of these processes, while not eliminating them, can reduce their power over you. The question is whether you have the courage to use that awareness, knowing it will make your life less comfortable, but potentially more real. The science is clear. The only remaining question is what you're going to do with this knowledge. Look around you. The digital age hasn't liberated us from self-deception. It's given us more sophisticated tools for it. Your social media profile is a masterpiece of curated deception. Not deception aimed at others. They're doing the same thing. No, this is deception aimed squarely at yourself. You post the highlight reel and then consume your own propaganda. You craft an image of someone living their best life, and then you start to believe that person actually exists. Think about your last Instagram story or Facebook post. How much editing went into that moment before you shared it? Not just the digital filters, though those matter too, but the psychological editing. You chose the angle that made you look happiest. You selected the moment that suggested the most fulfillment. You crafted a caption that implied depth, success, or contentment. Then you hit post, and something fascinating happened. You began to believe your own performance. This isn't cynical image management. You genuinely start to see yourself through the lens of your curated identity. The version of you that exists online begins to feel more real than the version that exists in your bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., wondering what you're doing with your life. But social media is just the most visible symptom of a deeper phenomenon. Consider the self-help industry, a $13 billion annual market built almost entirely on comforting lies. You can be anything you want to be. The universe wants you to succeed. Everything happens for a reason. These aren't truths, they're psychological painkillers designed to numb the ache of a difficult reality. And you consume them eagerly, not because you're gullible, but because they serve a function. They allow you to believe that your current struggles are temporary, that your limitations are illusions, that your dreams are inevitable if you just want them badly enough. The alternative, accepting that some limitations are real, that some dreams are genuinely out of reach, that the universe is indifferent to your desires, is too heavy to carry. Look at how you handle money. Your bank balance is a number. Your debt is a fact. Your spending patterns are recorded in precise detail. Yet somehow, you've convinced yourself that your financial reality is always about to change. You're on the verge of that promotion, that business breakthrough, that investment windfall. You buy things you can't afford because you're not buying them with the money you have. You're buying them with the money you're sure you're about to get. This isn't financial illiteracy, it's existential necessity. Accepting your actual economic position would require accepting limitations on your choices, your status, your future options. So instead, you live in a constant state of financial magical thinking, where next month is always going to be different from this month. Or examine how you relate to global crises. Climate change represents perhaps the most spectacular example of collective self-deception in human history. The science is clear, the timeline is urgent, the consequences are catastrophic. Yet you live as if this information exists in a separate universe from your daily choices. You know the planet is warming, but you still plan your retirement as if the economy will function normally for the next 30 years. You understand that consumption drives environmental destruction, but you consume anyway because stopping would require confronting the uncomfortable truth that your lifestyle is unsustainable. This isn't hypocrisy, it's compartmentalization. Your mind has become expert at holding contradictory beliefs in separate mental boxes, so they never have to confront each other directly. You believe in climate change, and you believe your individual choices don't matter. Both beliefs serve psychological functions, so both get to coexist without disturbing your daily equilibrium. Self-audit. Question 1. Right now, what's one major global or personal crisis you intellectually acknowledge but emotionally live as if it doesn't apply to you? Now, turn the lens inward. Think about how you handle your own potential. You have dreams you've abandoned, not because they became impossible, but because pursuing them would require admitting that your current life represents a choice to settle for less. It's easier to tell yourself that circumstances prevented you from becoming who you wanted to be than to face the possibility that fear or comfort-seeking played a larger role than you want to admit. You probably have a story about why you're not living the life you once imagined. Bad luck, other people's decisions, economic circumstances, family obligations. These factors are real, but they're also convenient. They allow you to see yourself as a victim of external forces rather than someone who made compromises with their own limitations. The truth is messier. You are both constrained by circumstances and complicit in your own constraints. Consider your relationships. How many conversations are you avoiding? How many truths are you not telling? How many connections are you maintaining out of habit rather than genuine affection? You've probably built entire relationships on mutual self-deception, unspoken agreements to not mention the obvious problems, to pretend things are working when they're not, to maintain the comfortable fiction that everyone is happy with the current arrangement. The most insidious modern self-deception might be the illusion of productivity. You stay busy to avoid stillness because stillness would force you to confront questions you're not ready to answer. You fill your schedule, check items off lists, respond to emails, attend meetings, scroll through feeds, all while avoiding the deeper work of examining whether any of this activity is moving you toward a life you actually want to live. Self-audit. Question 2. What truth about your life do you suspect but refuse to fully examine? What reality are you afraid to face because it might require you to change everything? Technology has made these deceptions easier to maintain. Your phone provides infinite distractions from self-reflection. Your feed provides constant social comparison that makes your own life feel simultaneously inadequate and normal. Your apps provide metrics that substitute for meaning. Steps walked, hours slept, messages sent, creating the illusion that you're optimizing your existence when you might just be measuring your avoidance. But perhaps the most sophisticated modern lie is the belief that you're more self-aware than previous generations. You have access to therapy, meditation apps, personality tests, and endless content about psychological growth. You use the language of self-improvement fluently. You can identify your triggers, name your patterns, and discuss your trauma with impressive vocabulary. Yet this psychological literacy might be its own form of self-deception. Knowing the names of your problems isn't the same as solving them. Understanding your patterns isn't the same as changing them. You might be using therapeutic language to create a more sophisticated story about why you're stuck rather than actually getting unstuck. Self-audit question 3. Where are you using self-awareness as a substitute for change? What comfortable insight are you hiding behind to avoid uncomfortable action? The digital age promised to connect us to more truth than ever before. Instead, It's given us more powerful tools for avoiding the truths that matter most, the ones we tell ourselves about ourselves. The question isn't whether you're engaging in modern self-deception. You are. The question is whether you're ready to see how. But wait, before we get too comfortable with the idea that self-deception is inevitable, let's confront the uncomfortable counter-evidence. Because sometimes, rarely, brutally, transformatively, people do face the truth without illusions. And when they do, something remarkable happens. Consider the moment of therapeutic breakthrough. You've been in therapy for months, maybe years, circling around the same patterns, telling the same stories about your childhood, your relationships, your limitations. Then suddenly, in one session, the comfortable narrative collapses. You see yourself clearly, not the victim you've been portraying, not the hero of your own story, but something messier and more real. Maybe you realize you've been recreating the same dynamic in every relationship because it's familiar, even though it's destructive. Maybe you recognize that your depression is actually suppressed rage at choices you've been too afraid to make. These moments are terrifying. Your therapist watches as years of carefully constructed self-image crumble. But what happens next challenges everything we've said about the necessity of illusions. Instead of collapse, there's often profound relief. The exhausting work of maintaining false stories stops. Energy that was locked up in self-deception gets released. People report feeling more authentic, more alive, more capable of genuine connection. Take Sarah, a client who spent 3 years insisting her marriage was basically good, despite obvious signs of emotional abuse. The day she stopped lying to herself about her husband's behavior was devastating and liberating. Within 6 months, she had left the relationship, reconnected with friends she'd isolated herself from, and started pursuing creative projects she'd abandoned. The truth that seemed like it would destroy her actually freed her to build a life worth living. Or consider the phenomenon of rock bottom in addiction recovery. Alcoholics and addicts often describe a moment when all their carefully constructed rationalizations suddenly became impossible to maintain. They could no longer tell themselves they were functioning, that their problem was manageable, that everyone else was overreacting. The illusions died, and in that death, recovery became possible for the first time. This suggests something Nietzsche may have underestimated. Some truths, however brutal, are ultimately more life-giving than the lies that replace them. Look at scientific progress itself. Every major advancement in human knowledge required someone to abandon comforting illusions about how the world works. Galileo had to face the truth that Earth wasn't the center of the universe, despite how this contradicted religious doctrine and human intuition about our cosmic importance. Darwin had to confront the truth that humans evolved from other species, despite how this challenged beliefs about our special creation. Marie Curie had to persist in studying radioactivity, despite institutional resistance to the uncomfortable truth that a woman could make groundbreaking scientific discoveries. Each of these breakthroughs required what we might call radical intellectual honesty, the willingness to follow evidence wherever it leads, regardless of how it challenges existing beliefs. And in each case, the temporary discomfort of abandoned illusions led to permanent gains in understanding and capability. Even more striking are historical examples of entire societies abandoning collective lies. Post-apartheid South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission represented a massive social experiment in choosing truth over comfortable fiction. Instead of maintaining the lie that past injustices could simply be forgotten, the country chose to excavate and examine decades of brutal reality. The process was agonizing, but it created possibilities for genuine healing that would have been impossible under continued denial. Similarly, Germany's post-war reckoning with the Holocaust stands as a counterexample to the idea that societies need noble lies to function. By refusing to minimize or rationalize their history, Germans created space for authentic reconstruction of their national identity. Countries that have avoided such honest reckonings often remain trapped by the very lies that were supposed to protect them. But perhaps the most compelling counterexamples come from individuals who've learned to live consciously with uncertainty rather than unconsciously with false certainty. These are people who've developed what we might call philosophical courage. the ability to say, "I don't know," without immediately rushing to fill the void with comforting stories. Consider the entrepreneur who can honestly assess when a business isn't working, instead of throwing good money after bad, in service of the illusion that persistence always pays off. Or the parent who can acknowledge their own limitations, instead of maintaining the fiction that they always know what's best for their children. Or the activist who can face the possibility that their cause might be losing without abandoning their commitment to it. These individuals haven't eliminated self-deception entirely. That might be impossible. But they've developed a different relationship with truth and illusion. Instead of being unconscious prisoners of their own stories, they've become conscious editors of them. They can distinguish between lies that serve life and lies that diminish it. They can hold beliefs lightly enough to abandon them when evidence demands it. This suggests a third way beyond Nietzsche's stark choice between crushing truth and necessary illusion. What if the goal isn't to choose between truth and lies, but to develop the discernment to know which truths are worth facing and which illusions are worth maintaining? What if some lies really do make us weaker, while some truths, however difficult, actually make us stronger? The evidence suggests that you are more resilient than your self-protective mechanisms assume. The truth you're avoiding might not destroy you. It might be exactly what you need to stop destroying yourself. But this raises the crucial question. How do you tell the difference between a truth worth facing and an illusion worth keeping? How do you develop the courage to find out? So, here you are, suspended between Nietzsche's impossible poles. You cannot live with pure truth. It would crush you. You cannot live with pure illusion. It will trap you. The question becomes, how do you navigate this paradox without losing your mind or your soul? The answer isn't simple, and it isn't comfortable, but it is possible. First, you must learn to distinguish between productive and destructive lies. Not all self-deception is created equal. Some lies keep you functional. Others keep you stuck. The key is developing what we might call meta-awareness, the ability to watch your own mind creating stories and ask, is this story serving my growth or preventing it? Start with a daily practice of conscious self-inquiry, but not the kind you might expect. Don't journal about your feelings or your goals. Journal about your rationalizations. Each evening, ask yourself, what did I convince myself of today that probably isn't true? Write it down without judgment, without immediately trying to fix it. Just notice. You might catch yourself thinking, I didn't have time to exercise, when the truth is, I prioritize scrolling through my phone over taking care of my body. Or, that person doesn't understand me, when the reality is, I haven't clearly communicated what I need. Or, I'm not ready for that opportunity, when what you mean is I'm afraid of failing publicly. This isn't about becoming brutally self-critical. It's about becoming curiously self-observant. You're developing the capacity to catch yourself in the act of story creation without immediately stopping the process. Sometimes you'll choose to keep the story because it's genuinely useful. Sometimes you'll choose to let it go because it's holding you back. Next, practice what philosophers call negative capability, the ability to remain uncertain without rushing to premature closure. When you don't know something, resist the immediate urge to create an explanation. When you're afraid, notice the fear without immediately constructing a narrative about why you shouldn't be afraid. When you're in pain, sit with the pain before deciding what it means. This is harder than it sounds. Your mind desperately wants to convert uncertainty into story, fear into strategy, pain into purpose. But in the space between experience and interpretation, something important lives. Your actual relationship with reality, rather than your story about reality. Consider implementing truth training in small, manageable doses. Choose one area of your life where the stakes are relatively low and practice radical honesty. Maybe it's admitting to yourself how much money you actually spend on unnecessary purchases. Maybe it's acknowledging how much time you waste on activities that don't fulfill you. Maybe it's recognizing which friendships you maintain out of habit rather than genuine connection. Start small, because the goal isn't to demolish all your comfortable illusions at once. That way lies break down, not breakthrough. The goal is to build your capacity to face difficult truths by practicing with truths you can handle. But here's the crucial insight. Becoming conscious of your self-deception doesn't mean eliminating it entirely. Sometimes you need to consciously choose illusions because they serve a genuine purpose. The parent facing a terminal diagnosis might choose to maintain optimism about treatment outcomes, not because the evidence supports it, but because hope enables them to be present for their children in their remaining time. The artist might choose to believe their work matters even when market feedback suggests otherwise, because that belief enables them to keep creating. The key difference is consciousness. Instead of being unconsciously enslaved by your illusions, you become consciously strategic about them. You ask, what is this story doing for me? Is it helping me become who I want to be? Or is it keeping me who I've always been? But individual awareness alone isn't enough. We need cultural shifts that support conscious engagement with truth and illusion, rather than unconscious immersion in comfortable lies. This starts with education that teaches what we might call myth literacy, the ability to understand and work with the stories that shape human behavior. Students should learn not just critical thinking skills, but metacritical thinking, the ability to examine the psychological and social functions that beliefs serve, regardless of their truth content. Imagine curriculum that teaches children to ask not just, is this belief true, but why do people need to believe this? What function does this story serve? What would happen to individuals and communities if this belief disappeared? This isn't relativism, it's sophisticated realism about how human psychology actually works. We need cultural spaces that honor both truth-seeking and meaning-making, without pretending these processes are identical. Science museums could include exhibits on the psychology of belief formation. Philosophy should be taught alongside psychology. Religious education could explore the difference between literal and metaphorical truth without assuming one is superior to the other. More importantly, we need to cultivate what Nietzsche might have called philosophical courage as a cultural value. This means celebrating people who can say, "I don't know," without shame, who can change their minds based on evidence without losing credibility, who can hold beliefs lightly enough to examine them honestly. Consider how we might restructure social media to support conscious rather than unconscious self-presentation. What if platforms included features that encouraged users to share their uncertainties alongside their certainties? What if there were spaces designed specifically for people to explore the gap between their public presentation and private experience? We could develop new social rituals around truth-telling that balance honesty with compassion, support groups that focus not on processing trauma, but on examining the stories we tell ourselves about our limitations, book clubs that read philosophical texts alongside psychological research, community discussions that explore how collective beliefs serve group cohesion while potentially limiting individual growth. Ultimately, the solution to Nietzsche's paradox isn't to choose between truth and illusion. It's to become conscious of the fact that you're always choosing. Every moment, you're deciding which aspects of reality to focus on, which interpretations to embrace, which stories to tell yourself about what your experiences mean. The question becomes, are you making these choices consciously or unconsciously? Are you choosing stories that expand your capacity for growth and connection? Or stories that justify stagnation and isolation? Are you maintaining illusions that genuinely serve life, or illusions that serve only comfort? This requires developing what we might call existential flexibility, the ability to hold your beliefs and identity loosely enough that you can modify them when circumstances change. It means accepting that you will always be, in some sense, living in a story you've constructed about reality rather than reality itself. But it also means taking responsibility for consciously constructing stories that serve your highest aspirations rather than your deepest fears. Here's what this journey toward conscious self-deception ultimately demands. You must become comfortable with discomfort. You must learn to find stability in uncertainty rather than certainty in illusion. You must develop the strength to face difficult truths while maintaining the wisdom to know which truths are worth the cost of facing them. This isn't a path toward perfect clarity. That's just another comforting illusion. It's a path toward conscious participation in the ongoing human project of creating meaning in a universe that offers no guarantees about what that meaning should be. The question isn't whether you can live without lies. The question is whether you can learn to lie to yourself consciously, strategically, and in service of becoming more fully who you have the potential to be, rather than remaining safely who you've always been. Nietzsche would ask, Do you have the courage to become the conscious author of your own necessary fictions? Or will you remain the unconscious victim of stories you didn't choose and can't examine? The choice, as always, is yours. But now at least you know you're choosing. You made it this far. You've nodded along with the analysis, recognized yourself in the examples, maybe even felt a flutter of insight about your own patterns of self-deception. But here's what I know about you that you might not want to admit. You're already planning to forget most of what you've heard. Right now, your mind is performing one final act of self-protective editing. You're deciding that this applies to other people more than it applies to you. You're telling yourself, you'll think about these ideas later when you have more time. You're mentally filing this under interesting but not urgent. You're maintaining the comfortable distance between intellectual understanding and actual change. This is the most sophisticated lie of all, the lie that knowing about self-deception somehow exempts you from it. So, let me be direct. You are lying to yourself right now about something important, something that affects not just your own life, but the lives of people who depend on you, trust you, love you. You know what it is. The moment I said it, something in your chest tightened because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe it's the relationship you're staying in, because leaving would require admitting you've wasted years on someone you don't actually love. Maybe it's the career you're clinging to, because changing course would mean acknowledging that you've been sleepwalking through your own life. Maybe it's the addiction you're managing instead of addressing, the family pattern you're perpetuating instead of breaking, the dream you've abandoned while telling yourself it was unrealistic. Maybe it's something smaller but no less significant. The way you pretend to be happy when you're dying inside, the way you agree with opinions you don't hold to avoid conflict, the way you perform a version of yourself that's so convincing, you've forgotten who you actually are underneath the performance. Whatever it is, you know. And knowing that you know, that's what makes this moment dangerous, because now you have to choose. You can close this video, return to your regular programming, and let this insight fade into the comfortable background noise of ideas you've consumed but not acted on. You can treat this like entertainment, like content, like something that happened to your mind but not your life. Or you can do something different. You can let this moment be the beginning of something real. Nietzsche didn't write about self-deception to make you feel bad about being human. He wrote about it to give you a choice you didn't know you had. The choice to become conscious of your own story creation instead of being unconsciously controlled by it. The choice to examine the lies you tell yourself instead of being lived by them. The choice to face the truths that might liberate you instead of hiding from them because they're uncomfortable. But here's the final paradox. You can't make this choice gradually. You can't ease into truth-telling the way you ease into a cold pool. Either you're willing to face the specific lie you're telling yourself right now, or you're not. Either you're ready to stop performing and start living, or you're not. Either you have the courage to disappoint the person you've been in order to become the person you could be, or you don't. This isn't about perfection. You will keep lying to yourself about some things. That's human. This is about consciousness, about moving from unconscious self-deception to conscious choice, about taking responsibility for the stories you tell yourself instead of being the victim of stories you didn't know you were telling. So here's my challenge to you. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, right now. What is the lie you've been telling yourself that you're most afraid to examine? What truth are you avoiding because facing it would require you to change everything? Write it down, say it out loud, tell someone you trust. Stop protecting yourself from the very thing that might save you. Because the cost of your comfortable illusions isn't just your own stunted growth. It's everyone who never gets to meet the real you. It's every relationship built on false foundations. It's every opportunity missed because you were too afraid to see clearly. It's the gradual death of your own authenticity under the weight of stories you tell yourself about why change is impossible. The question Nietzsche leaves you with isn't complicated. Will you continue to be unconsciously lived by your lies? Or will you finally have the courage to consciously choose your truths? Comment below with the lie you've caught yourself believing. Not for me, not for the algorithm, for you. Because the first step toward freedom is naming the prison you've built around yourself. The door is unlocked. It always has been. The only question is whether you'll walk through it. What is one comforting illusion you've uncovered in yourself? Share it in the comments, not because confession is required, but because naming our self-deceptions out loud is how we begin to loosen their grip on us. If you want more philosophical explorations that strip away comfortable illusions and reveal the hidden mechanisms of human consciousness, subscribe for the next chapter in our journey toward uncomfortable truths. Because the examined life isn't easier than the unexamined one, but it's the only one worth living.